I'm Skip Williams, co-founder here at KingsBridgeBCP. I've been working in the BCP field since 1999, more than 20 years later, and 200 plus plans under my belt, and a BCI Consultant of the Year award. It's time to share some of that knowledge.
And I'm Roswitha Firth, business continuity professional since 2000. I love today's topic. I've been using a similar planning model since around 2010.
And with that, welcome to the KingsBridgeBCP podcast, where we talk about all things BCP. So what are we talking about today, Roswitha?
Today, I'm interviewing you to find out how the lessons learned from COVID illustrate Kingsbridge method of business continuity planning. So Skip, start us off with a brief explanation.
With any brief explanation, there's a bit of a backstory. The threat risk assessment, or TRA for short, is the worst part of doing a BIA. This is where you assess which threats could impact your business. Everybody wants a zombie apocalypse as a threat, or they'll what if the incident to the point that the world has exploded. In an effort to streamline the process, we've started to focus on what we'd actually be dealing with after an incident.
What if?
Sorry. This is when it's agreed in our plan that we don't need to include snowstorms in Phoenix, as it's a very unlikely threat or incident. Inevitably, somebody in the meeting pipes up with, well, what if there is a snowstorm in Phoenix? This simply derails the entire discussion and we don't get anywhere. They'll continue to what if it until the incident is so huge, it's outside the scope of the BCP.
Gotcha. Thank you for that quick sidebar.
Historically, business continuity planning has focused on dealing with one disaster at a time. You either had a fire in the building or a flood or a power failure, you get the idea. If the incident wasn't exactly what you're planning for, your response was stuck winging it and going off script from your BCP, defeating the entire purpose of BCP.
Absolutely. But the reality for some time, and magnified since the beginning of the pandemic, is that your organization may be faced with multiple disasters at the same time.
Exactly. For example, if you're in the middle of a long-term recovery from a lost building and another disaster occurs, what then? That doesn't make enough sense to you? Let's consider a cyber breach. It's everybody's favorite hot button right now. IT's immediate step is to shut down all access to all systems. And what does this do for your hybrid workforce? They are immediately offline. So your cyber threat, which used to be an IT only problem, is now making your company limited on their accounting, their finance, their sales, and HR. Now, some people might look at that and say, no big deal. But can you run payroll from a non-work computer? Can you let your customers know? Can you access your building using your key card? It's not just an IT problem anymore. And if we want to make something a little bit more current, I guess, as for pandemics, I think we can agree that most people underestimated the impact a pandemic would have.
Yeah.
For years now, when it came to building BCPs to deal with pandemics, everybody wanted the pandemic to be over in 3 to 5 business days, never over a weekend. I have a feeling we're not going to have to worry about that time frame any longer.
So how do we address those incidents that can overlap?
We address them by not focusing on the how or the why we got to where we are, but instead on focusing on what do we do now that we're there, which is the no building, no people, no systems, no suppliers planning model that we find very successful for overburdened BCP planners. And many big businesses have been employing this for years. It addresses oversights in traditional scenario-based business continuity plans instead of rigid plans, each with their strict silos to have response. Not only will you have fewer plans, you really only have 4 results to deal with and not infinite threats, which are easier to maintain. So you also have a huge benefit of flexible and adaptable plans.
Skip, tell us how the no building, no people, no systems, and no suppliers overcomes the shortcoming of the traditional BCP.
No people, no buildings, no systems, and no suppliers is a very tidy way to plan for disruptions of any kind. I want to stress, this is not an all hazards approach. Your plans are written to solve a problem of what if you have no building or no access to it, or some or all of your systems are unavailable. Now what? It does not matter if the access to your building is because of civil unrest or shutdowns, such as we experienced during the pandemic. Similarly, no systems can be caused by a power outage or a ransomware attack. The same idea applies to no people and no suppliers.
How does this address incidents like COVID?
COVID is actually a perfect illustration of this smarter approach to being more resilient. Swine flu or SARS pandemics were really weak pandemics at best. A lot of them had life returning to normal within a week or a month at the longest. Using the no people, no buildings, no systems, no suppliers planning, you can migrate from one response, no people, to no building, to no suppliers very easily. And in case you missed the reference, the no people migrated to no building, which migrated to no suppliers, is the evolution of COVID. First, we had no workers because the world had shut down. Your building was fine, your networks were fine, we just couldn't go to the office. Then, once systems could be accessed from home, we had no building, as we had access to our people, we had access to our systems, but still couldn't go into the office. Finally, and hopefully it'll be over soon, we have a no suppliers issue as the supply chain is still recovering from COVID. Did your existing BCP pivot and evolve with this incident? I bet you were like most, and it didn't.
That sounds pretty great. If someone likes the sound of no building, no people, no systems, and no suppliers, how do they make it the foundation for their business continuity plan going forward?
If you're new to BCP with either no plans or very outdated ones, you're in luck. With no legacy plans to interfere, you can start from scratch. Simply follow the BIA methodology to analyze the impact of each of your business processes. If they have no people, no building, no systems, and no suppliers. We find that no people is generally the easiest to start with. As always, start with no payroll, as that's the first business process that's impacted, and build from there. With existing, even current plans, you can take a staggered approach. This will depend on the resources for building your plans. Probably the easiest way to do this is choose one and implement it during your next review cycle. Repeat each cycle until you've converted it to this planning model. Another way to do this is to extract the common actions from each plan you've already have and move them to the applicable no building, no people, no systems, no suppliers plan you're hoping to build.
So I have to ask, what do you say to clients or other practitioners with concerns?
This next one should make any under-resourced BCP practitioner happy. You can skip the TRA. I know that sounds radical. Let me explain. Remember the TRA we discussed earlier, the zombie apocalypse, when you have already planned for the potential losses of no building, no people, no systems, no suppliers. There's no point in backtracking at the why a loss might occur.
Okay, so how could that impact your audit if your audit requires a TRA as part of your business impact analysis?
Don't tell anybody, but in all honesty, very, very few auditors even look for a TRA. They're simply told to confirm a BIA. And because the TRA is a subset of the BIA, it frequently gets overlooked. If there's a completed BIA with or without a TRA, generally the box gets checked.
Okay. What about exercises? How do you test or exercise a no building situation, for example?
That's actually a little bit tricky. We learned this one the hard way because early on we tried to call it a no building incident, thinking that, well, we know what this means, and so everybody in the room should be able to understand it as well. However, it was too abstract for the participants. So now what we do is that we use a real life threat that would cause a no building incident, such as flood, fire, or anything along those lines.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. And thanks for joining us today as Skip shared his insights about the no building, no people, no systems, and no suppliers planning model and why it addresses flaws in traditional business continuity planning during COVID, as well as for any other kind of disaster your business might encounter.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Go to our website, KingsBridgeBCP.com, for more information about the no building, no people, no systems, no suppliers planning model. And we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.
Bye and thanks.
See you next time.